June is here and 20 million Mumbaikars are on edge. Monsoon is coming. Anticipating the annual flooding, all the attention will now shift to the Mithi River, that tormentor-in-chief of Mumbai city. वो सब ठीक है, but what in the world is common between Daenerys from the Game of Thrones and the Mithi River in Mumbai? Now, the story of Daenerys' life took HBO 73 episodes and 8 seasons to tell. We have like around 8 minutes. So let's take a smart shortcut and examine Dany's titles, which are like a highlight reel of her life. They go something like this. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, Protector of the Seven Kingdoms, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Breaker of Chains, and Mother of Dragons. Now let's see how these attributes are embodied by Mumbai's Mithi River. Skipping past Dany's first of her name bit, which is also true of the one and only Mithi River, let's begin with her other titles. 1. Stormborn. Daenerys was born during a massive storm that sank the entire Targaryen fleet of Dragonstone. Literally, she was born in the middle of a storm, and so she's called Stormborn. The Mithi has been around before the dawn of mankind, flowing silently from the Sanjay Gandhi National Park to the Mahim Bay. But nobody really knew about her existence until 26 July 2005. That fateful day, Mumbai witnessed the most destructive storm in recent history that lasted 2 nights and 2 days and drowned this city of dreams. On this day, the Mithi broke into and invaded the consciousness of Mumbai. Literally, she was storm-born into public memory. 2. Queen of the Andals and the First Men. In the Game of Thrones, the First Men are the original human inhabitants of Westeros, and the Andals were invaders from Essos. In our little story, Old Bombay Island corresponds to Westeros, while Bandra and the rest of the suburbs correspond to Essos. The first men of Westeros were not unlike the Colis, artisanal fisherfolk, and the first inhabitants of Bombay. The Andals are represented by the numerous pilgrims, travelers, and conquerors from across India and across the world that came and eventually became a part of Bombay. Historically, all the important forts at Bandra, Mahim, Dharavi, and Sion were all along the banks of the Mithi River. That's how important she was. Indeed, the Mithi was queen to them all. Perhaps one of the few sources of fresh water across the islands, the Mithi also provided rich fishing grounds to sustain the islanders on both sides. A queen indeed. 3. Protector of the Seven Kingdoms. It's not so far-fetched to imagine the 7 islands of Bombay on India's west coast corresponding to the 7 kingdoms of Westeros in the Game of Thrones, of which Dany was the protector. The estuarine part of the Mithi River was once full of dense mangroves and had protected these 7 islands from floods, storm surges and tsunamis for thousands of years. The marshland of the estuary and the thick mangroves also formed a protective shield against invaders from the north. It was the Mithi that separated Old Bombay from Bandra and the other burbs. As a reminder of this timeless division of kingdoms, auto rickshaws are still not permitted into the sacred realm of Old Bombay even today. 4. Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea. The Great Grass Sea, also known as the Dothraki Sea, separated Westeros from Essos. Although it is unclear why it was called the Great Grass Sea, one can imagine it was probably because of marine vegetation. The corresponding body of water that separates Old Bombay from the Salsette Islands is the Mahim estuary, where the Mithi empties her waters. Before the reclamation of Bombay city, this large estuary connected the Arabian Sea at Mahim on the west all the way to the Thane Creek at Mahul on the east. It was full of dense mangroves and can therefore be likened to the Great Grass Sea. Today, a pale shadow of this once majestic estuary is visible from Mahim, while the rest has been reclaimed by the airport and the Bandra Kurla complex. It is into this Great Grass Sea or Mahim estuary that the Mithi pours her fresh waters that she carries from the hills of Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Indeed, Mumbai's first piped water supply came from the Vihar lake that was built by damming the Mithi River in 1860. She gave us water, she gave us food, she gave us protection. She was our rightful queen, our Khaleesi of the great grass sea. 5. Mother of Dragons. The Battle of King's Landing was the final engagement of Daenerys Targaryen's war for Westeros and the Iron Throne. In a culmination of grief and rage, Daenerys laid waste to the ships in Blackwater Bay before she breached the walls of King's Landing. She stared down at a city that was once the symbol of her family's power. In a terrifying turn of events, the Mother of Dragons unleashed Drogon on a destructive rampage across King's Landing, destroying countless buildings, incinerating thousands of village folk, and mercilessly murdering Lannister soldiers with dragon fire. Dracarys. On 26 July 2005, after facing centuries of merciless abuse from an ungrateful city, the Mithi finally revolted. Her swelling waters drowned away an entire city in a flood that claimed 1,000 lives. The economic losses were unbearable, and the urban poor were left crippled and devastated. All airports and railway lines in and out of the city came to a complete standstill. All highways were closed, and the island of Mumbai stood shivering alone in the grip of terror for 48 long hours. In a short span of 150 years, the Mithi had been shackled and reclaimed. The forests and mangroves along her pristine banks were shaved away for concrete jungles, and the greed of man turned this mother of Mumbai into a stinking, pitch-black sewer. That day, the Mithi meted out justice and unleashed her wrath to remind us of man's place in nature. 6. Breaker of Chains. Daenerys liberated all of Slavers Bay and freed the slaves in the cities of Astapor, Yunkai and Meereen, as she became known amongst the freed men as the Breaker of Chains. As Bombay grew from tropical island to port city to industrial hub and finally into the financial capital of India, it attracted millions of migrants. The majority of them were poor and unable to access formal housing in the city. They found shelter in informal settlements on the city's edges, and thus were born the slum communities of Bombay, including Dharavi. The bulk of these slums mushroomed along the Mithi River, whose marshy banks were undesirable to the formal city. And so for generations of Mumbaikars, the Mithi became their Misa, their mother, their provider and breaker of chains. But this final role she has yet to fulfill. Yes, she has given hope and shelter to millions, but she is yet to completely break their chains. That is a promise she will fulfill very soon. Stay tuned for more on the Mithi River. I hope you enjoyed this little marriage of Mumbai and the Game of Thrones. If you came here for Daenerys, I hope you feel a little more connected to the Mithi River today. And if you came here for the Mithi River, then you, my friends, are the unsullied. This is the Angry Urbanist signing off. See you next time.